The start of a new life, a fertilized human egg, hardly big enough to see. Over the next 9 months, it will divide and grow millions of times. Changing dramatically in size and shape, within the mother's womb, it gradually takes on a human form. The single egg has become a complex organism of some 2 trillion cells. A baby that can now live in the world outside the womb.
Good.
12 hours ago, Valerie and her husband conceived a new life, a brother or sister for their young daughter, Lauren. Living creatures of all kinds need 2 parents. From their genes, offspring inherit an enormous range of looks and personality traits. A first child gives parents little idea of how their later children will turn out. Like humans, all mammals spend their formative months safe in their mother's womb. Larger animals have longer pregnancies, but for our size, humans have one of the longest of all. For most women, the 9 months of pregnancy are a voyage into the unknown. Yet every child develops according to a precisely programmed sequence of events. Lauren already has the thousands of eggs she will need for her reproductive life. They were formed while she was still in her mother's womb and will develop here in her ovaries. The mature egg is the largest single cell in the human body and the only one visible to the eye. One day each month, an egg leaves the ovary and drifts into the fallopian tube. If sperm manages to reach the egg, a new life can begin. Hundreds of sperm swarm around the egg, but only one will be successful. Its precious cargo is the genetic information carried in DNA. It will mix with the mother's genes to form a new individual with a unique genetic makeup. These chemical instructions ensure that every tissue and organ in the body forms in the right place at the right time.
There's that. That's the starter.
DNA contains all the information needed to make everything from eyes, noses, and ears to kidneys and lungs.
Oh, look at that. What else have we got in here?
4 weeks have passed since the egg in Valerie's womb was fertilized. Although she suspects she may be pregnant, she is uncertain. No signs have appeared. Yet in the past month, many critical events have happened within her.
There he is, look. Can you see him? Yeah, he's a bit like Postman Pat.
A day and a half after fertilization, the egg divides into 2 cells. During the week it takes to travel down the fallopian tube, these cells divide again and again. The process begins slowly and then speeds up. As the cells divide, they become smaller, but incredibly, the evolving cluster grows no bigger than the original egg. Finally, the cells drift into the womb. Its spongy lining has thickened to make ready for the cells to burrow in. Taking nourishment from Valerie's body, her new child now begins to grow. Only certain genes in each cell switch on. A flood of chemical messages are released, instructing the cell to become part of an eye, or the heart, or an arm, or a leg. From this simple beginning of division and multiplication, these identical cells begin to change. Some cells within the cluster start to take shape. In less than a month, the fertilized egg has become an embryo. One end is the head, and the other the tail. A swelling along the back will form the brain, spinal cord, and skin. Buds begin to grow, which will gradually turn into legs, arms, the liver, and heart. As early as the 3rd week, a tiny heart begins to beat, and blood begins to flow. The heart consists of 2 simple tubes. A final 4-chambered heart will not appear for another few weeks. Still, the primitive heart must practice working as a pump as soon as possible. After a month, the developing child not only has a functioning heart, it also has the beginnings of a brain, eyes, spinal cord, lungs, stomach, kidneys, and intestines. Valerie's period is now 2 weeks late, and she's feeling sick in the morning. It's time to check out her suspicions. Her urine carries the message. The tiny embryo has drastically shifted the chemical balance within her body. A flood of new hormones brings on her sickness. The excess hormones flushed out in urine are detected by the pregnancy test, and it is positive. And there is another early sign of pregnancy. Valerie's breasts have gotten bigger. Women usually notice the change after the first missed period, even if there are no other symptoms. Still, the signs can be subtle and few in number. It's not surprising that many women do not realize that they are pregnant. Now, 5 weeks old and the size of a pea, Valerie's child is attached to its membranes by the beginnings of the umbilical cord. The jaw appears and the brain is developing fast. A few days later, the baby's head is now 1/3 of the body's total volume. The dark patch will become the retina of the eye. The eyes are wide open. As of yet, there are no eyelids to cover them. Now the heart beats strongly. The hands look like paddles. They're supported by cartilage, but soon bones will begin to form. At 6 weeks, fingers and toes are still webbed, but they're growing fast. The mother has now missed her 2nd period. Also visible is a mouth with lips, the beginnings of a tongue, and buds for 20 milk teeth. At only 7 weeks, an ultrasound scan reveals the baby's first movements. But its mother cannot feel anything because the embryo is so small. It weighs only 1/30th of an ounce. Yet the features of a unique new face are beginning to emerge. Limbs are longer now, and fingertips are swollen where touch pads are forming. The pose is characteristic of a 7-week-old embryo. Its mouth is now well developed. Although there are still no eyelids, the eyes have a lens in front of the retina. By the end of the 8th week, the embryo, at last, looks like a human being. Little more than an inch long, it begins to build the first real bones and becomes a fetus. Week after week, more and more of the skeleton develops. Even though Valerie has a tiny human within her, with a complete set of limbs and organs, there is little to show the outside world, since the baby is still smaller than her thumb. At 9 weeks, the fetus is totally out of proportion. The head is now almost half its length. Attached to its mother by the umbilical cord, the baby floats in a fluid-filled sac. Its nostrils are plugged, and gluey ridges have sealed its eyes shut. Footprints and palm prints are now indelibly engraved for life. Blood vessels show up easily through the tissue-thin skin. Despite the size of the head, the brain within is still very primitive. There is no sign of any real consciousness. Limbs twitch, but their movement will not synchronize until 5 weeks later. After the 14th week, the baby's body finally catches up with the growth of its head. For the first time, its legs are now longer than its arms.
Since he's about 2 months.
Oh, bliss. What a super boy.
Valerie can only feel the baby's movements when its legs or arms hit the side of her womb. Zoe has constant reminders of the kicking baby in her